Willow Creek Springs presents Healthy Living with your host, Joe Grumbine.
Okay.
Well, hello and welcome to the Healthy Living Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Grumbine, and today we're going to begin with part 2 of our new series, Healthy Living Through Adversity. We have Juan with us as our guest, and he's currently incarcerated. We were talking about trauma, stress, adversity, a concept called ACEs. And Juan, welcome back, and let's get back to it.
Right on. Thank you, Joe. And just again, I appreciate you having me. So so when you think about healthy living through adversity, right? Well, childhood is like the first place where we experience adversity, right? And so that's why this is so important, because we learn that we were resilient then through whatever we had to survive. So whatever adversities we face today, we can have confidence that we have all the tools that we need to get through it, and be resilient. So right now, I give a little bit more information about like early childhood experiences and how this shapes behavior, health, and survival patterns. So ACEs are generally potentially traumatic events that occur before a person's 18th birthday. These experiences disrupt the child's sense of safety, stability, and connection. Okay, common ACEs include like physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, neglect, poverty, domestic violence, substance abuse in the home, mental illness and caregivers, incarceration of a parent, and separation or divorce. Okay, so that's generally a nutshell understanding of ACEs in itself.
And pretty much every child deals with at least one or more of those, right?
Yeah. And the remarkable thing is this is new science. A lot of this came as research that was conducted regarding men in prison, as opposed to the general population. So it is staggering to know that men in prison, a lot of us have 6 or more ACEs.
Wow.
So they know this across the board, right? Yeah. And so this sets the stage for, all the new information that's coming out is really important to say, while we may be criminalized to say, why, these people are horrible people or they're monsters, it was like, no, we were the most traumatized people in society.
Wow.
And there's just certain things that you can expect once a person have experienced this high level of ACEs. It can almost be compared to like if you plant a seed in soil that or like dirt, rocks, and weeds.
Right.
You wouldn't expect a healthy plant.
No,
right?
For sure.
And so that's the importance, right? That's the importance that trauma has in the environment. That's the important role that it plays in the child's life.
There's a passage in the Bible that mentions that, right? If you plant a seed on rocky soil, nothing will grow, or you won't get fruit bearing. And if you take care of it, nurture it, you're gonna have good fruit and all of that, right?
Exactly. And the funny thing is why we expect something different when we're dealing with human beings. Why would we expect for us who have been subjected to some of the worst things that a human being could be subjected to, and yet blame us for the decisions that we've made? Now, don't get me wrong, there's a certain level of accountability that definitely, this is not to get away from someone being accountable for their actions. It's
Right.
just really, explaining how, these experiences or a person's environments really shape who they become as people, and how, yeah.
Well, I think it also puts a huge light on where we should put attention to, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, the main thing is understanding this with compassion, right, and treating people with dignity and care, and knowing that no one was born evil. You
Right.
know, things happen to us, and one thing that we'll discuss later on is how to reprogram. So if you look at the human brain as a computer, and the conditioning or the conditions that we grew up in, it wired our brains a certain way, and we were just operating on those programs, And so the good thing about the human brain is, they have this thing called neuroplasticity, which means we can rewire our brains. Our brains can be rewired. This is not an incurable problem, as we have been.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
So what we're going to be tracking here is how do you get to that point? So right now we're in the awareness stage, right? Just becoming aware of ACEs and how it affects a person. We're not trying to fix it at this point. We're just trying to really understand it.
Right.
And so with that, I'll give you this quote by Dr. Carol Darcy, which defines trauma as a stressful event that leaves a person powerless and overwhelmed. Trauma creates a disconnect within the person, so you may find yourself disconnected from your body, your mind, your thoughts, your emotions, and even other people. And she says, so the way to help is to really find ways to reconnect to yourself. This disconnect is very important, and one worth elaborating on, because when I seen this, I was like, oh wow, disconnect. So psychologically, they know it's proven that we have these filters in place. We could not hurt or harm anyone if we acknowledge their humanity. If we saw their humanity, we could not hurt them. So this disconnect that it's talking about, when I disconnect from myself, I disconnect from humanity. Well, the problem with that is if I disconnect from my own humanity, then I disconnect from other people's humanity. And so now people are no longer human beings, they're objects.
Wow.
Right? And this is like you said, what do you do? Well, we have to understand, in order to solve this crime problem or this violence problem, it's really a disconnection problem that a person is experienced as a result of their own trauma. So, and like she said, so the only way to help is to reconnect back to yourself. You have to, and then the journey my journey was connecting back to my humanity. Because again, if I connect back to my humanity, then I can connect back to other people's humanity. And that connection of me not being able to harm another human being is now brought back online.
Wow, that's heavy. You think of a prison as a very difficult place to connect and find your humanity. In my brief experience with incarceration, showed me that the jail I was in for just a few months it seemed like they were trying to disconnect you from your humanity. It seemed like they were trying to dehumanize you in the way they treated you, the way that they
Exactly.
had things set up. So you got quite an obstacle to overcome in a place
Exactly.
like that.
Hi, this is Joe Grumbine, and I wanted to share an update. The platform that hosts this podcast has made some changes to the subscriber settings, and we have a number of subscriber-only episodes that we offer to the supporters, and for a minimum of $3 a month, we can get you signed up. And if you're already signed up and you're having some kind of trouble locating these episodes in the other platforms, I would say maybe the best answer is to unsubscribe and then resubscribe. I'm sorry for the hassle. I don't have any way to make a change, but I'm very grateful for all the support. Thank you.
And not only that, you understand the complexity of the problem, right? Because often these institutions or these systems, they profess to be rehabilitative places, right, where someone is supposed to learn. They're supposed to be corrective, right? But it's like, well, how can you have this rehabilitative approach, but at the same time you dehumanize people?
Right.
Right? So there's a conflict there. But the good news is the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, they are making some changes. I will say that. They are making some changes in how they are, they are making some changes in how they interact with incarcerated people because of all this new science. So there is hope in that. They are at least making training.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Yeah. So now, if you want, we can take a look at how this shapes your worldview.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So often, this comes, like we often, and I could say myself, but, feel like I don't matter. I can't depend on anyone. I'm not enough. The world is a dangerous place. No one would take care of me or my needs, right? There's a constant threat of danger at all times. There is nothing in me worth knowing. So these are like, and this is different for everyone else, right? But these are just some examples of like where low self-esteem come from, no confidence in yourself come from.
Right.
Because we didn't have anyone like, or someone to reflect our worth back to us.
Yeah,
so
and that reflects a feeling, right? I mean, like that's how you feel, and when you're sitting there dealing with either a consequence or dealing with the memory or the experience of an adverse situation, you find yourself feeling those waves that you were just describing.
Yeah. And it's also important that those experiences, right, those are the original, what you call the original trauma, which becomes like triggers. Now, when you have an emotional reaction to something, right, in the present, okay, that resembles the original trauma, your brainstem, like we haven't gotten into talking about the brainstem, amygdala, and prefrontal cortex, but that's the sequence in which the information coming into your senses is processed. And so the brainstem can't tell time. So when it sees something that resembles the original trauma, you don't know that what you're experiencing right now, you experience it as if it was happening 20 or 30 years ago or whenever the original trauma happened. Right. So, I mean, this is really, to me, it was really fascinating to see how my brain processed this information, and then how that brainstem, once something, I have this emotional reaction, means something from my past is being triggered, that gets into the amygdala, right? So the amygdala is your alarm system, and it's the survival center.
Right.
And what the amygdala does is it shuts down. Yeah, the lizard brain, right? So that shuts down your prefrontal cortex, which is the place where you govern right, wrong, and things of that nature, your moral issues.
Exactly.
And so when you think about the amygdala shutting down the prefrontal cortex, right? So now you're in survival mode as a result of this trigger. Okay. Here's a feeling. Have you ever got so mad to where you lost your appetite, or you cannot articulate yourself correctly? You want to say something, but it just comes out all wrong?
Sure.
Okay. So that right there is what it feels like when your amygdala has taken over, because your prefrontal cortex is offline. Right. So now you lost the ability to talk. You're not hungry. Right. And things of that nature. So the goal of what we're trying to do here is, now that you understand this process, and this is accelerated, like information, but now that when you start to understand this process, the goal is to keep the amygdala from shutting down your prefrontal cortex. to recognize that something from my past is being triggered. To understand that
You have 60 seconds remaining.
like dissociation is my stress response.
Well, we got 1 minute left. We're burning through this fast,
So
but you got a lot of great information.
yeah. So the key takeaway here is just understanding that trauma often causes us to disconnect from ourselves, right? And the only way to heal is just to find ways to reconnect back to ourselves. And that's what we'll be discussing, and that's the help. Okay, therein lies the challenge, but that's the help that we're offering here to know that we can get past these adversities in our life. So, hopefully this information has been helpful.
That is powerful, and it connects us to where our ability to make choices can be kept in the forefront, even when we're going through a difficult trauma. And I know what you're saying. When you have something that you get triggered by, it's like almost like you lose time, like you go into a dream state, but you can learn how to maintain at least keep one foot into the conscious world where you are still thinking about what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. He left, but I'm here.
All
I
right.
just kind of want to add something off of what he said, though, because he didn't. I'm surprised he didn't say this. But when he was bringing up, like, when you get so mad and your amygdala is, like, your brain is in your amygdala, and let me see if he's there. 1 second.
He says, well, you can't articulate your words, and you
Tail link.
and you
So
get.
when he said, like, the digestive stuff,
Yeah.
when we did our research, it literally, like, stops your digestive system. So
Sure.
that's why we're not hungry. That was so crazy to me when we were reading that and stuff. I was
Yeah.
like, wow, like that makes sense.
It's
why
true though.
you lose
when
your
you get-
appetite.
Exactly. When you get stressed out or anxious or angry or any extreme emotion like that, you don't even think about food.
Yeah. And it just shows
Yeah.
like more, it supports like how it impacts your body internally. Your
Exactly.
organs, not even your mind, your organs. Like that is crazy.
It affects, and that's the whole thing. The brainstem regulates your organs, and it doesn't think. It takes care of your heartbeat, your lungs breathing, your kidneys, your lungs, all of that. And it's important that it functions that way, because what if you had to think about your heart beating? We'd all die. Right. We'd all forget. Hey, Juan, you're back, so we can just keep rolling. We're still going here. So we're me and Ad and I kept the conversation going. We can keep on rolling here.
Yeah, you mentioned about the brainstem. So another function of the brainstem is so the brainstem is constantly, like, without you knowing it, is constantly searching for a threat. Okay, and so now imagine you're walking, right? I'm sure you had this happen. You're walking somewhere, or maybe you're at home alone, and all of a sudden you hear this sound or something, and all of a sudden it feels like hairs on the back of your neck stand up.
Sure.
Right? And you're like, what is that?
Right.
Right? Okay, that was your brain. That was your brainstem.
Right.
And it's always searching for a threat to see, and it's always assessing whether you are safe or not. Right. And then you feel that feeling like, once you realize, like, oh man, you know what? That was nothing. The leaf.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
A tree branch hit the window or something like that. Then you relax, right? Well, that brainstem, that's the brainstem at work. It's always looking for a threat, right? And then, but if it flags a threat, that's when it triggers and sends an alarm system to the amygdala. And that's when that's your survival mode, right? So the amygdala, that's responsible for the release of cortisol, like the stress hormone cortisol. That's your fight, flight, or freeze response.
Right.
And so what the amygdala feels like when let's say you're walking through the woods, right? And then you see this bear, right? Your heart starts pumping, right? Your heart starts pumping, your palms get sweaty, your veins, and you're starting, and that is the beginning of the amygdala shutting down the prefrontal cortex. And what it's saying is there's no time for thinking. Right now, I have to react. Okay? And again, the reason why that's important is because, like, when the bear walks away, then your stress response system relaxes, right? It stops pushing all that cortisol and those stress hormones. Well, the problem with trauma is that the bear could come home every night in the form of a spouse, in the form of a abusive parent, or any number of circumstances that triggers the stress response system. And now the issue becomes, now that the bear comes home every night, this is toxic stress when a child is constantly being bathed in this cortisol. Okay, this toxic stress, these hormones, right? And it creates the hypervigilance in which now, because of the prolonged release of this toxic stress, right, of this cortisol, now it's like they said, it's like a gas pedal that's stuck down all the time. We are constantly being bathed, like our brains never shut off the release of this cortisol. And that leads to other problems.
It's brutal. It's the cortisol and adrenaline that get released when you get these issues. They put such a stress just on your body, not to mention your mind and your spirit, but your body itself. It's the thing that you should only have to experience once or twice in a lifetime. And these people are dealing with it. You guys, we all are, whoever's dealing with these traumas are dealing with it over and over and over again. And as you start to understand that, you realize how brutal that is on the system, mind, body, and spirit.
Yeah. And the with all the new research, they're actually connecting a lot of now health issues, so just so everyone knows, this science that we're talking about here, it was developed between 1994 and 2004. And so this is a lot of the new research that's coming out. And so now they're connecting a lot of mental health issues, physical health issues. All of these issues are now being connected to trauma. And like you said, the stress response or the release of that, being bathed in that cortisol for this prolonged period of time, and how that cortisol, it modifies, DNA, it changes your immune system. I mean, there is so much to uncover when you talk about this toxic stress, and I'm glad, that this information is now getting out there.
Yeah, it's a physiological issue, as well as, like you say, there's still accountability and choices, but there's a physiological issue that is influencing the situation dramatically. It's not just a little thing, it's a big thing. And when you get to that fight and flight, like, I don't know how many times I've had close calls in my life where, something came, almost got hit by a car, whatever it was. The world stops, time stops. You go in slow motion, that's all real. And imagine every time, your father came home, or your spouse comes home, or whatever, the uncle or whoever it was, that you have to deal with that kind of a drama and a trauma. And it's like I say, that's supposed to only happen once or twice in a lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah. And that creates what they call your stress response. And so now that stress response system is with us today, right? So I carry all of those. And again, that's what being triggered is about. So someone can do something, And it could be a extremely harmless. I remember watching this video with the Compassion Prison Project, and to drive this point home, a child was shoved in the closet while the father was beating the mother. Wow. And later on in life, he was in the pool, and a kid was just playing with him and pushed him, like kids play, dunked him into the water. Well, when he came out of the water, he came out aggressive and violent, ready to hurt this kid. And so what happened was, within that little shove, that shove triggered him being pushed in the closet as a child. And that's the issues that we're dealing with. To your point, what you're saying is, when someone has that fight, flight, or freeze, that stress response, it's automatic. Not even.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
So it's not something we think about, and he got dropped back, 10 years, into that moment when he was being shoved in that closet again.
Wow.
And that's what he thought was happening. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like a flashback.
So, yeah. Yep. Which reminds me, I'll tell you this. So they say like triggers are like trap doors. And so imagine you're standing on a trap door, right? The doors that you stand on, and they open up and it drops you into whatever. So triggers are like trap doors. And what's happening is, so when something happens in the present that triggers something from the past, it's like those trap doors open up and you're dropped back 20, 30, 40 years. Because remember, the brainstem can't tell time.
Right.
So it doesn't know. Yeah. So it thinks it's reliving. It really thinks, and it feels. You have all the physical emotions and you have all the physical sensations of the original trauma as if it was happening in its full force at that very moment.
Wow.
And you can't even tell the difference.
Wow.
Yeah.
So being aware of that, how does that help you when you're now aware of that, and over time, as they're understanding how these things work, it's easier to bring that to somebody's attention if you're trying to help them. What is being aware of this? How does that affect you?
For me, it was so funny. That's when I was explaining to you about the brainstem always looking for a threat. So I was out on the yard, and I had a conflict with the guy where I wasn't sure where we were at, and I was kind of looking to see where is he at? And the funny part was I realized, I said, you know what? This is my brainstem at work. I'm looking for a threat. And then even when my amygdala is being triggered and my breathing is getting shallow, I said, I have to interrupt this process because I know that's going to shut down my prefrontal cortex. So I know, take deep breaths, meditate, and deep breathing. We all hear about meditation and breathing. Breathing and meditation keeps your prefrontal cortex online. It actually stops the amygdala from shutting down the prefrontal cortex. Right.
So you can recognize.
So I knew.
You can recognize a symptom of this setting in motion, and you can head it off at the pass.
You start putting your tools in place, right? I knew how to start putting my tools in place. Start breathing. So when my breathing got shallow, because I knew, I said, that's the amygdala. And it's instantaneously now I know that's in my amygdala, right? And it's trying to shut down my prefrontal cortex because of this threat. So I know shallow breathing is one of my stress response. And a meditative thing is to increase my breathing. So what I do is I take deep breaths, right? And so that calms me. And the deep breathing, right, that breath, it helps me to stay in a safe place. It helps me to stay calm. So it helps me regulate and stay regulated so I don't go into a place of dysregulation. right? Where I don't feel safe because of this threat. Because again, if I don't feel safe, then my stress response system is going to be activated and I'm going to go into survival mode. But my prefrontal cortex tells me that something from my past is being triggered, and I'm able to say, oh, let me stay in the cortex. This is not happening. This is not the original trauma happening all over again. This is my emotional response. I need to deep breathe. I need to take a second and think. So I can put all of those healthy things in place so that if I do, like I did a couple days ago, I did have to address a conflict with an individual, but I addressed it while I was in my cortex.
Wow.
And we were able to talk out. We were able to talk out our differences where before I would have went in shutdown mode and straight survival, like I'm trying to survive. But instead, I was able to keep myself regulated and calm. Yes.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
That's a huge breakthrough right there. It's so powerful to be able. I mean, you think about that. You go, normally I would have gone into survival mode, which means possibly violence, possibly repercussions, possibly, long-standing problems, and instead you let your prefrontal cortex take over and you handled it with words. That's huge.
Yeah, exactly. And it works, and that's the good part about having this information, is that now I can interrupt my own cycle of violence. I can interrupt it now. I understand it when it's happening, and I can be an active participant in keeping myself regulated.
That is fantastic. And well, I know we're just about out of time again. So, and I think this time we're going to cap the episode. We're a good half hour. That's a good length for it. So a parting shot for us, Juan.
Oh, we lost him.
Oh, well, Ed and I, that's one of the things, that the challenges we have about, doing this way. But I think we're getting some great conversation, and I think we're going to reach and help a lot of people.
Definitely. Yeah. The programs in there they bring a lot of education and knowledge. Only if you apply it, and you actually want to learn about it. But
Right.
I've learned a lot of stuff about trauma. Before I met him, I just was starting to get into trauma work. But oh my goodness, now I'm and I even have to sometimes be aware, like today when it was frustrating trying to get back inside the thing. And I was I felt myself getting frustrated. I do. Sometimes you fall short,
Right.
But just the more and more you put the tools in place, like he said, you'll get better and better. And I'm sure we all know, the circumstances he's in, you kind of have to do more accelerated, or there will be repercussions, to your actions. Out here, it's just if I get mad
get
and
away with a lot.
frustrated.
Right. You can slip around a lot, and it doesn't necessarily affect you so dramatically. And there, something goes wrong, bam, it's a big deal. Well, listen, Ed and I, we're going to go ahead. Oh, is he back?
He's not.
Oh, okay. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap this episode, and we're gonna put it in the can. So this has been another episode of the Healthy Living Podcast. This has been part 2 of Healthy Living Through Adversity, a new series. And want to thank our listeners for making this show possible. And we will see you next week, or next time, I guess I should say.
Yeah.
This has been another episode of the Healthy Living Podcast. We produce this show so that people can share their stories, people that have overcome obstacles, people that are undergoing obstacles. We're building a community of health-minded individuals. If you're interested in supporting the show,
please leave a review on the platform you're listening to it on. If you're interested in becoming a guest, please send an email to itsjoegrumbine@gmail.com, or you can send a note into the notes section of the podcast. All right. Well, thank you for supporting this show, and we hope you've enjoyed it.